All right. Welcome to another edition of Coexist on IQ Podcast. I'm your host, Co Lewis, and creator of Coexist. This is Conversation for Conservation. And to say that I'm excited and elated would be the understatement of the century because we have an amazing guest. And I'm so happy that Leif Cocks of the Orangutan Project is going to be my first guest of 2021. What a way to start the year. Goodbye, 2020. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. But a little backstory on this podcast, how it originated, and how we get these amazing guests, and the reason why we get these amazing guests is I started this podcast after a 30 plus year career in radio. I wanted to use the platform to expand and help other foundations and other great people who do great work around the world. And having a foundation myself started in 2015, a co-founder of Nasefu Wildlife with Victory Wallace, you kind of realize how difficult it is to start a foundation, to support a foundation, and keep the project going. I mean, it's a challenge on a daily basis. And this man, our special guest tonight, has been doing this since 1998. And I don't even know where to start. I mean, you are an author of several books we'll talk about. You have many awards that you've won, including the Order of Australia, which is an amazing honor. And it's amazing, but very worthy and very deserving of the work you've done. You oversee other foundations that are all tied into the Orangutan Project. So it's under the umbrella, and it makes sense when we break it down why this all works, why you're part of International Tiger Project, International Elephant Project, and many others. So, Leif Cocks, thank you so much for joining us. How are things in Australia?
Oh, wonderful to be here. And yeah, no, things are fantastic in Australia, except for I'm not allowed out.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, that will change over the year and I can get back out into the field.
So when was the last time you were actually out in the field? And I take it you're in Borneo and Sumatra all the time, correct?
Yeah, I spent a lot of my time, traveling on various locations in Sumatra and Borneo, virtually, in a continuous cycle throughout a year. And that's kind of been my routine for some time. And, almost quite literally, I got the last flight out of Indonesia back to Australia before they closed the borders. And so, yeah, I've been sitting here working remotely, having online Zoom conferences with all the great local partners. And we also have, for the Orangutan Project, we have a great advocate and conservation hero, Hardy, who founded the Centre Orangutan Project. So he's come over and joined the Orangutan Project as our field manager. And he's out there now with the rescue team looking to rescue orangutans and prevent rainforest destruction. And so he's really stepped up the plate to help us fill any gaps that have been left by the COVID crisis.
Yeah, this is a big, your foundation there are a lot of moving parts. And if I'm correct, do you have 11 locations that you guys are overseeing in Sumatra and Borneo? Is 11 correct?
So no, it's probably something like that. And what happens is we're all about partnerships. And we develop organizations and foundations and companies to meet the specific requirements to save the individual ecosystems with specific tailor-made actions. And so I sit on the advisory group for various companies which are applying for or leasing or managing land, or local yayasans or foundations which are enacting direct on-the-ground action. And so through a diverse and powerful group of partners, we work collectively to achieve the outcome. And so I always say why humans are so successful, not because we're very smart in themselves or very capable with themselves, but if we learn how to collectivize, and join together and work cooperatively, we can achieve a lot. And the Orangutan Project is not about the Orangutan Project. It's just legal fiction, in a sense, created to achieve an outcome. It's about us using whatever's necessary to collectivize and achieve maximum outcome in the field.
Yeah. And it's funny you mention that, because with our foundation, we just had a discussion with the group that wants to, they kind of identified the same need, that if you have all these organizations working independently, that's a lot of waste of time and resources. When you can compile everything and put everything together and have a structure, you can achieve a lot more, probably cheaper because of volume. And so funny that you mentioned that, because we just literally had this discussion with the group back in Zimbabwe.
Exactly. And what typically can happen is people, if they don't have that happiness and joy within themselves, are seeking external verification from that, through name, fame, money, and power, even if they're under the guise of social service and being a conservationist. And so they start competing their ego, their publicity, their organizations against others. And it actually not only is inefficient use of resources, is actually counterproductive. You have organizations presumably on the same side spend more time fighting and arguing amongst each other than the people who are actually invested in destroying the environment and destroying the species. And so I always say we have to reform ourselves before we can reform the world. And a big part of that is becoming absolutely happy and content with ourselves, and then we can easily perform selfless actions. And then it's easy to cooperate. It's easy to give reputation, fame, power, that makes sense, and money to others in order to achieve the outcome, because you no longer require that internal support for your happiness.
I feel like God put you in my path for a reason, because you are speaking about things that are really things that we've been dealing with, issues that we've talked about. And a guy I very much respect, Dr. Thomas Snitch, who's a wildlife crime expert, he said, Co, when you start this project, get ready for the jealousy and the infighting. I'm like, what? I thought we were all on the same side. I'm like, when I hear people say things, I'm like, are we doing the same thing? Like, who's in this for fame? I'm here to get stuff done. I don't know about anybody else. And that seems to be what you're doing.
Exactly. I mean, the irony is, if, we want to be a hero and save the world, we need an enemy. Superman needs Lex Luthor, otherwise he's just a strange guy in underwear on the outside, So there's kind of this symbiotic relationship for people who want to do good in the world and be seen to be better than others because I'm doing good. So oddly enough, it ends up they're not really arguing or fighting the people, in a sense, they're actually combating, because there's this kind of somewhat sick symbiotic relationship which is not recognized. But the conservationist down the road, if he gets that grant or he gets that article, or that makes that's taken away something that I feel I deserve, and I need to support myself, because I might find I was actually lying to myself. I may have started intentionally off for a selfless cause, but my inner need is creeping in and destroying everything that I'm creating. And so what you often see is a cycle of people and organizations, raw ambition and ego can get you quite a distance initially, but it falls down like a house of cards and you never really achieve anything long lasting. It's only through selfless action and collectivizing with others that we can get out of this mess. And so this is why often you might mention my books, they're getting more philosophical as they go along, because we really have to not use the same selfish short-term, maybe to want for a better word, masculine approach to that got us into this mess. We can't use the same approach to get us out of this mess.
Well, I'm glad you shared that, because part of the reason why I started this podcast was for baby foundations to listen and to learn, because these are all steps that we've all tripped over. We thought this was the way to go, but then we found out, no, that was a waste. You want to go to somebody who's got experience, and you started this foundation back in 1998. So you have a lot of experience under your belt that you can share with others. And if we can get the word out to foundations out there, we may help them avoid pitfalls of what baby foundations go through. So, so let me ask you this. I always like to find out, what was the impetus? What got you into the field of conservation? Was it a pivotal moment, or was this just something that was inside you? You knew you had to do something for the greater good. Where did that all come from?
I guess since leaving university, I've never really worked a day in my life. In a sense, I've kind of just done what I wanted, and I've had the opportunity. Someone's at least paid for my living while I've just done what I wanted. And initially, it was working with 15 orangutans here in Perth, and wonderful, self-aware persons, the most beautiful, noble creatures I've had a privilege to get to know and raise from babies, and taken from babies all the way back to the wild, nursing them, being an orangutan mother. And what I, of course, discovered is there may not be humans, but there's self-aware persons, same as us. And as I'm describing, I think a far more noble form of person than we see expressed in the human species. And they didn't belong in captivity. Like all persons, we don't do well in captivity. And also, of course, quickly discovered from my, going up into Borneo and helping rescue orangutans on my holidays, is that they've been driven to extinction in the most horrible way that we can imagine, being burnt alive and shattered to death. And so that really then just said, well, okay, this seems like a useful dedication of my life, to save these voiceless persons who not only have such individual suffering, their whole species may be lost unless we make real meaningful action over the next 10 years.
We have 97% of the same DNA. I mean, these are living, breathing, sensitive creatures. They have structure. They have intelligence. They are, like you said, self-aware. These are absolutely amazing animals on this planet. And you're right. What's going on with deforestation, with just the crushing, they're surrounded by the enemy on all sides, literally and figuratively. And so I want to ask you, so 100 years ago, I guess World Wildlife Fund or something came up with a figure that there were approximately 230,000 orangutans in the wild. I don't know if that was a correct figure. Where do we stand right now, number-wise, and how are we doing right now with saving them?
Well, there's actually 3 species of orangutans, and the Bornean orangutan has 3 to 5 subspecies. So they're a diverse group, and so it's not just an orangutan in that sense. The Bornean orangutan, there's probably about 45 to 55,000 left, and about 5,000 a year being killed. The Sumatran orangutan, about 14,000, and a Tapanuli orangutan, about 800. Each one of these are critically endangered, and we're seeing, systematic loss of the habitat and loss of population year on year. And why I say we've got 10 years to turn this around is because we need to save enough viable ecosystems of the right type, shape, and size of forests in order for populations to survive. That, for example, in 50, 60 years' time, there may still be orangutans, but the populations will be unviable. But we only got the next 10 years to do that. Otherwise, there may be rainforests, but maybe orangutans, but the rainforests and the orangutan populations will no longer be sustainable. And incidentally, that's the same timeline for a whole planet. And these things are intrinsically linked. We've got the most important 10 years in all of human history. After millions of years of evolution, we have the privilege and the obligation to live in the most important 10 years of our species and our planet. And so this is a time that we need to consolidate and act now.
So the project overall, I'm, caring and having a foundation has many aspects and many things that a foundation does. Um, what would you say are the big three things that the Orangutan Project does? Is it rescuing? Is it working with corporations about deforestation and teaching them there's got to be a different way? I mean, what would you say is the number one priority with you guys right now? What is the key?
Okay, I can describe it from two different angles: a practical and a philosophical, and they meet. Practically, we're going to save 5 to 8 complete ecosystems, the right type, shape, and size of rainforest to save the orangutan populations in the next 10 years. The elephants and tigers, the biodiversity, and the indigenous local human population that needs to survive off this forest. And this will then support sustainable economies for not only Indonesia, but the whole world through mitigating climate change. So that's our big picture strategy. And like a doctor looking at each ecosystem and describing the right medication and the right dosage to most efficiently cure disease and save the complete ecosystems.
Yeah. So the ecosystems you were talking about, not only are you protecting the orangutan, but several other species underneath that. They're all tied together. So when you save one ecosystem, it's not one species you're saving countless species and keeping these ecosystems healthy. So great. So that's one of the angles. So please continue.
Yeah, and just following on from that, see why I work with the Tiger, founded the Tiger Project and Elephant Project, because the idea is if we save the orangutans and these ecosystems under the umbrella of the orangutans, everyone else gets a free ride underneath that conservation umbrella. But what we found is there were a couple of species falling outside the umbrella. Tigers had Pacific criminal syndicates coming in and poaching them. The elephants, a human-elephant conflict with the human population, and the Pacific management because they had these herds scattered across the island which were no longer connected. And so we had to develop separate projects to bring all the remaining species under our strategic outcome. But yeah, following on to the next point is that there's only one problem in the world, is the lack of compassion for other living beings. This is, and so if we have compassion for orangutan, tigers and elephants and indigenous communities, future generations, people who live in other countries of different races and religions, the problems will be solved. It's our ability to exploit others for personal gain, which is the root of the problem. And so, for example, people may be surprised, in one of the ecosystems working in, we actually are feeding all those children because we're the big multinationals have taken the land, and the local community cannot find enough food anymore because they're a victim too, and their kids are going to school malnourished. So we're feeding the children at school and providing them education while we help the local communities move from slash and burn agriculture and hunter and gathering, which was actually sustainable when they had enough land, if their traditional land rights were respected. And we're developing agricultural systems under rainforest canopy, such as honey production, vanilla production, jungle rubber, dragon dye blood production, which will actually, if in 7 to 10 years, when they come to production, provide a sustainable economy, which means the community will become rich and prosperous. And so, as well as obviously providing all the environmental resources for the planet and the local areas. So these things are always win-win situations if we have compassion for all living beings. So it's not wildlife versus the environment or the economy. Sorry, wildlife versus people, environment versus economy. It's about creating a world which is best for everybody.
Being aware of others and the impact that you have by making a decision to buy one product. What is the long-term impact? And that is something that I become very aware with because of palm oil. And of course, this is ravaging the planet and this whole area, in Indonesia and all that because of the burning and planting and all that stuff. So let me ask you, because you are one of the voices of the plight of the orangutan and the other species in these areas, When you're do you have a lot of direct contact with these multinational companies like I believe Nestle and all the snack companies are in there, like Frito-Lay and Pepsi and all that stuff.
Mhm.
They are ravaging this planet. I'll just call them out. I don't have any problem with that. I mean, it is what it is. These companies are going in, they're paying a cheap wage, they're absolutely decimating ecosystems, wiping out species, they're leaving nothing left, and it is just this slash and burn mentality, literally and figuratively, in the region. Are you having discussions with them? Are they listening? Do they care? Are we seeing a change? Where do we stand with these companies coming in and doing this complete
Mm.
destruction?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and I'll address it on two levels. One is addressing the let's say sustainable palm oil, which is not true, because sustainable for palm oil is grown as a monoculture, and all monocultures are unsustainable by their very nature. That's how nature works. And that's true in America or Europe. If you have a monoculture, you'll end up destroying the environment and the productivity of that land. That's just the way the world works. And so there is no sustainable palm oil. But going anti-palm oil is not going to save one tree, because there are many other unsustainable forms of monoculture which businessmen can put on the land once they gain the money from destroying the forest. And so we can spend all our time going palm oil free, which I think is a good idea, but we're not going to save one tree, because we're not addressing the real drive. The real drive is they're given access to land to destroy, yeah, and place an unsustainable monoculture on to get very short-term gains at the expense of future generations and expense of local communities. That's the real issue. So secondly, addressing companies often, again, is what will happen is if you say to this company, don't destroy that forest, there is a dozen other opaque companies willing to move in. Well, they're not going to destroy it, we're going to destroy it. And so addressing single companies or single commodities on a superficial level seems logical, because that company or that product is replacing the rainforest, and therefore if we attack them, we're going to get an outcome. But that's just not how the world works. And so what we believe in is, with these ecosystem saving, is ask the government for specific changes in land use status. Change it from production forest to ecosystem restoration concession. Change it, from production forest to conservation forest or community forest. So we're asking for specific changes. And also with companies, we're asking them, we don't want you to sign some pledge in 2025, you stop destroying the planet, and when 2025 comes, you'll make it 2030, yeah. or whatever greenwashing you'll do, because that's what has systematically happened over a long period.
Are you saying people don't keep their word? What?
Yeah, exactly. They're just appeasing people temporarily so they can keep destroying the planet and make short-term profit. We're asking specifically, no, we want you to give up this bit of land and reforest this bit of land and connect these ecosystems here. So very specific asks is what we're asking. But even then, to be honest, that's a challenge. For example, Michelin has destroyed part of the ecosystem we're trying to protect. Which is, okay, they're a big multinational, that's what they do. But they're selling the area that they've just destroyed as green credits as a conservation project. So, the irony and the cynicism of these big multinationals is really beyond our compare. And of course, there's people online now innocently thinking that it's supporting a green project when they've done actually opposite. It was when I've been there, it's been beautiful rainforest, and Michelin subsidiary has turned it into a desert wasteland. So there's one of many examples. So public pressure and people getting together, I think is fantastic, but we must be very much more targeted, with very specific asks. Otherwise, it's too wishy-washy. We've got 10 years to solve the problem, and it's not.
Are governments listening to you? Are they at least hearing what you have to say and what the foundation's having to say with projections? Like, if this happens, we're going to see this happen down the road. Are they actually listening for change? Because now I think finally the whole globe has gotten the word that we are in such a race for a wipeout here. You know what I mean? The destruction is in the crosshairs. We can see it. Either we hit the brake now or we're just going to face oblivion. Are countries and governments listening more, or is it still all about the buck?
No, they're not listening. In some ways, and I guess it could be true in America. It's certainly true in Australia and in Indonesia. We've lost control over democracies to big businesses.
Yeah.
And so the funders and the supporters and the people who give these guys jobs and bribes through speaking fees and these sorts of things are deciding what governments do. And of course, we hope after COVID-19, we would have a green recovery. This would be the reset to say, okay, let's now move forward in a sustainable way. But we're seeing not only in Australia, and we've seen obviously until today in America and Indonesia, they've actually reducing environmental laws, allowing companies more access to destroy the environment and pollute under the guise of need for economic recovery.
Yeah.
Of course, that's all unsustainable and destroyed. So we're actually seeing a doubling down, if that makes sense, from governments in the policies and practices, which is going to destroy our planet.
They're using COVID as an excuse, saying, "Oh, we have to do this to get the people back on their feet." I mean, I get it. The impact has been incredibly. It's been deep and incredible around the globe. No, there's no doubt about it. But so let me ask you this. So when you are getting these ecosystems, you're trying to protect certain areas. Are you guys buying land? Are you kind of doing a nature conservancy and just buying a section just outright and it's yours? Is that what you guys are doing?
No, and buying land is a very attractive sell. But the vast majority of land and all the land of significance and of significant size in Indonesia is owned by the government. Mm-hmm. So you can sell bits of forest, but they usually are not conservation significance. It's good for marketing because, again, it's that very simple idea. You buy the land, you protect it. That just appeases. But the reality is, no, that's other than some very specific places, for example, where the village, let's say moving a village or something specific like that we need for conservation. Mm-hmm. It's about leasing land. It's about changing land use status that still remains under control of the government and supporting their law enforcement. And it's about leasing land. And this is what all the palm oil plantations, all the pulp paper plantations we're storing, they're just leasing land. It still remains government land. You have a 60-year lease with a 99-year option. And conservationists need to follow the same path. And lease the land and restore the rainforest and the ecosystem back to its functioning that it had before the destruction.
Yeah. And in Zambia, they have the 99-year lease plan. But we've been very fortunate, and I was wondering in your area, we've been very fortunate that we have a wonderful relationship with the senior chief Nsefu. He's a wonderful guy who wants to be a great leader, and we've been fortunate enough that he's been granting us land for the projects that we've been doing because we're trying to help his community and bring in economic opportunities. We are in the midst of building our second school to educate the children of the area so they understand the importance of their wildlife and what it means to be good stewards of the country and of the environment. So we're tackling all these angles, but having a really great relationship with Senior Chief Nsefu has been amazing. And we love seeing the leader that he's being right now. I mean, he's proud of what's happening in his sector. I was wondering, is there that kind of social structure in Asia, in the areas that you work? Are there chiefdoms or there kingdoms like that? Is there any way you could work in the hierarchy of the specific area that you're in?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question, and it's extremely varied. As Indonesia is, it's like a 1,000 different cultural groups over tens of thousands of islands and locations. So it's a diverse group, and although the Indonesian language may unite them, it's not often the native tongue. So just to give you some idea of diversity. And some areas we're working is actually really easy to work with local community because they may still have sometimes a very intact social system, with their chief and and that sort of stuff, and you go in, the village is all clean, and everything's regulated, and you can go in, does that make sense, very easily, and work out win-win situations, so the community wins and the conservation sustainability happens. In other areas, it's a mess. There's groups coming from outside and bullying these groups. There's corrupt chiefs who are illegally selling off land, down the road to make a buck, and so it can be this kind of social mess, if that makes sense, like a Wild West situation, literally. And then it becomes very much harder, does it make sense, to bring all the diverse groups with diverse interests, and to bring them all together, for a win-win situation, because there isn't that internal cohesion with all the people living in the ecosystem.
Yeah. And, we've just found that when we started this, we said we have to tackle poaching from all angles or it's not going to work. You just can't be an enforcer. You can't come into somebody's country and, hey, tell them what to do. That's never going to work. You have to come in as a team player, identify things that you see that maybe they're not seeing. How can we be of assistance and support you? Like we said, we got the education, economic opportunities. We have our own ranger team. So we're really trying to cover the full spectrum so people feel like they have skin in the game, like they are part of the answer of a new way to take care of Zambia and the future of Zambia. So we found that it's really been working. And I wish everybody had that kind of situation. Like you said, you have the Wild West in certain areas where it could be anybody you're dealing with and you never know what you're up against. But I was just wondering.
Yeah, I'm very loath to speak in national terms because nationalism is last bastion of a scoundrel. There is no nations. These are legal fictions. We're all beings who are living off this planet, and the artificial borders, for me personally, have no meaning. But we have to acknowledge, obviously, that exists. But from that perspective, Indonesia, and these colonies are created, former colonies are created in debt in a way that allows Western countries to exploit their environment and their people to bring wealth back to the West. And of course, there's a new player on the field, China, who's saying, okay, we want in on this game now, through the debt trap diplomacy. And we're going to add some more exploitation to these people by extracting wealth back to our country now. And so how I see it is, as some obviously come from a Western background, is we're going in and trying to mitigate some of the damage of colonial, post-colonial or neo-colonial exploitation. So okay, our countries are part of the problem, but we also want to be, as citizens, is working out the solution to mitigate the problem and to allow the local communities to be independent and prosperous, and sustainable for their children and grandchildren.
What would you say your biggest success so far is with the Orangutan Project? What would you say that you look back on it, you're like, this was more than I ever imagined, like we achieved it? Have you found that thing yet? What would you say you guys have really exceeded in?
Of course, it's still a work in progress. We have so much to achieve over a short period of time. So talking about success is I guess, premature. It's certainly possible, and we are going to do it. But it certainly is still early days. But the two things from a strategic point of view is we formed a joint company with two wonderful partners, PT Allen Bukit-Tigapulu, and we're leasing live track to lowland area in the Bukit-Tigapulu ecosystem, where orangutans are being released to re-establish extinct population. So that is, to me, a wonderful step forward, and we're trying to, with other partners, replicate that success in further ecosystems that we're bringing online. But from a personal level, bringing the orangutans back from captivity, being with their mothers at birth, and helping raise them, and then taking them on that journey back to freedom, to be independent persons in the wild, on a more humanist viewpoint, that has also been a wonderful high point.
How bad is the wildlife trafficking in your area? Is it out of control? Is it a difficult area to get to? Like, how is it? Because it just seems to be not slowing down at all. As much as the information's been getting out there, there are agencies trying to stop it, intel and, going online. How is the trafficking in your areas?
Oh, look, overall, it's horrific, and the same people who do drugs and run guns are running the wildlife trade, So these large criminal syndicates are doing it, and they're very powerful, and they have a lot of influence. And so it is very difficult to overcome them, but we can. We support hundreds of dedicated rangers out in the field who, at least 1 or 2 die a year, get killed doing their job. So these are the real heroes. Day out and out in the jungle. And we've demonstrated that, when we support these brave young Indonesians, we can, greatly mitigate the effects of poaching. And so it's really only a matter of scale, and the main thing we're lacking is the resources, the financial resources to invest enough to save enough over the next 10 years. Because there is brave young Indonesians who are willing to take the fight into the field, and we have the strategy and the technical know-how through ourselves and wonderful local partners. It's just really, at the moment, it's just a lack of financial support, which is kind of stopping us getting where we need to as quickly as we need to.
Yeah, and for anybody who's just tuning in, welcome to Coexist. I'm speaking with Leif Cocks. He is the founder and president of the Orangutan Project and runs about 800 other foundations in his spare time, and he writes books and he wins awards because he's awesome. But anybody who's just tuning in and listening about wildlife trafficking, what makes this such a heinous crime, and it is probably the third most successful illegal crime in the world behind drugs and human trafficking, is that these crime syndicates, these criminals and their syndicates, move into areas of poverty and will pay $5 to somebody to take out an elephant, get an orangutan, whatever the animal is, literally selling the soul of their country and their future for a few dollars, because they're just coming in because they know there's abject poverty. So it takes a few dollars. Then at the end of the road, the horn or the animal parts or whatever are selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it is the most, to me, I just feel like there's a special place in hell for criminal syndicates in this field. There is just a special hell, because not only are you obliterating species, you are taking advantage of people who are just trying to survive. And when you got a little money put in front of you and you're just trying to feed your family, it is just really, you're taking such advantage of people and their situation. It's a special evil that's going on, and it's out of control.
And the ask is a little bit more aggressive than that. I've heard the saying with the Mexican cartels, you want silver or lead. Silver is to pay you, or the alternative is not to get paid. The alternative is you're going to get a bullet.
Yeah.
And so,
you get your life threatened. Absolutely. They force you into these decisions. Well, okay, I think I want to live. Okay, I'll go take out a tiger or whatever. Yeah. I mean, this is how evil this whole thing is. So when you see any kind of exotic animals being smuggled out, anything to do with the exotic pet trade, any of that, you don't participate in it at all. Let the authorities know if you come across anything like this, and let's get these people put away.
I mean, the irony, and let's say palm oil plantations, child labor, rape, exploitation, modern slavery, environmental destruction, um, um, burning of indigenous community village, you name whatever crime, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
But when you meet the executive who's selling you, let's say, the palm oil in America, he's a nice guy. He's a nice white man with a suit, very polite, got a family, loves his dog, But there's huge disconnect. Doesn't make sense. It's a bit like with everything. I love eating meat to using products of destructive products in the wildlife trade. It's so sanitized come to us,
I know. It's all pretty and packaged. You're like, what? This is all perfect. Nothing, no, there was no suffering behind these potato chips. Not one bit. It's all good. You're like, really? If you, I always liken it to if you open the curtain behind a lion that you're looking at, a lion in captivity, if you saw the wreckage, the death and despair behind that lion, you would go, okay, I'm not going to be participating in this anymore. I'm not going to go to the circus. I mean, when you see what's behind that, and it's not all pretty and packaged nicely, you're absolutely right. It's two kinds of criminals. They just wear different outfits is what it is.
Exactly. They're all part of the same system, but they're kind of sanitized by the time we reach them, which allows us to live our lives. Does that make sense? Going around destroying the planet, as good people, because there's two things happening. One is the destruction, which is caused by us, has been hidden from us. But we're also, to be honest, we're also compliant with that. We have cognitive dissonance. We really don't want to know. We really want to ignore the facts. And, when it's a bit like being a vegan at the barbecue, I mean, you just agitate people. You don't have to say anything. Just being there is because you're basically you're threatening the suppressed knowledge. Doesn't make sense of your actions.
Yep.
And you're threatening that, and they just get annoyed at you, but they don't really know why. Because, it makes sense.
I don't want to know where my steak comes from. I don't want to know. I'm like, really? You don't? You ought to.
Yeah, and so So we as humans, we have cognitive dissonance is actually part of our framework, is because as we've evolved, it's more advantage for the survival of humans to have group cohesion than to be right, because group cohesion and collectivizing properly is what's made us survive. And so we have this cognitive dissonance that we just want to believe that what our group is, doesn't make sense, our tribe, and believe the narrative. And when somebody tries to object to that, there's a natural hatred and resistance of that. And that kind of worked pretty well when we're running around in the jungle, because as the way we evolved, but it's destroying the planet. And so we need some almost collective evolution of within ourselves, personally, society, to be able to allow us to look beyond our tribal brain, and let our cognitive dissonance lay bare. That makes sense. And as good people, act in a way which is in the best interest of everybody.
So if you had, with all your years in conservation, and you've spoken and you've written and been interviewed, and you kind of look back on everything that you've seen and you've witnessed and tried to deal with, what would be the number one thing you would tell people to be either aware of or to change in their life, so that we have a chance 10 years down the road and these animals have a chance? What would be the one thing you would would tell people? What do you think is the most important?
Well, I of course, as my questions follow, I have two, but at two different levels. The first one is collectivize. As individuals, we can't achieve it. And we've been sold a pup. I think people destroying the planet love us to go out and go palm oil free, vegan, whatnot, and sit on our little hippie farms and go, if we feel good about ourselves because we're not destroying the planet. Our impact on the world is insignificant, if not nothing at all. Only way humans have ever achieved anything is by collectivizing. So if you really want to make a difference, become, join, or support a collectivization of people who are going to achieve the meaningful outcomes you wish to change in the world. So my first thing is ask you to collectivize. Individual action is fine for your own moral thing. You may want to become a vegan, you may want to go palm oil free. Any of these things is fantastic, and I recommend you do it. But you have to also take the leap to collectivize with others to achieve the outcomes that we need. Secondly, of course, is reflecting back is we have to reform ourselves before we can reform the world. So I'm not suggesting that everyone has to sit in the Himalayas and contemplate the navel for 10 years before taking action. But I've seen so many, as we've discussed earlier, so many times where people undertake, as a action to make the world a better place, and they end up not achieving it and actually making things worse. So let's spend some time, in a sense, with personal development and becoming more selfless, more happy, doesn't make sense, and more giving, while we undertake collectivization to make meaningful change in the world.
And I'm sure you can relate to this. But when I go back to Zambia, so here I am in the US, very, materialistic, commercial, just go, go, go. It's just everybody's on cell phones. It's, selfies. I'm insane in my own country because I feel like I can't connect to it anymore. I want to disassociate from a lot of the behavior that I just see all the time. So when I go back to Zambia, I can't even explain it. I have an instant soul reset. I'm in the quiet. I see the majesty of these animals firsthand. I'm breathing the air. I see a sunset in a completely different way. I really feel like you are doing a disservice to yourself if you don't break away and find that place of peace and nature. Nothing calms you down quicker and more thoroughly than being with nature and just listening to the earth, just being out there and quiet. And I'm now a part owner of a safari camp with Vic called Zakomo Safari, and when they do game drives, sometimes I'm like, hey, you guys go on your own because I want to sit on the Longo River and I just want to listen. I want to listen to earth and I want to listen to what's going on. And I tell you, I was so different when I came back. Everybody at work is like, oh my God, you look different. I said, I am different. This is how I'm saving my soul. I think everybody needs to do this and find that foundation or that country that wherever it is, find that place where you want to help and you want to save it because you are so passionate about the impact that place has. It takes one person, like you said, to collectivize. It's more powerful when you're with like-minded people trying to do big things. You can set your sights on the moon and doesn't feel overwhelming. And to reform yourself. I mean, that is a true statement right there.
I also take ecotours into the rainforest with our partner Orangutan Odysseys. And people often come back with deep, meaningful experiences for just the same reasons that you're describing. It's going home, and there's a peace beyond understanding, which is created, is connecting people back to nature, but also in a most more fundamental way back to themselves, And my encouragement is that deep connection of oneness with nature and other living beings that we may experience, when we have these magical moments, is within ourselves all the time, but it's lost by the myriad of the mind, in daily life. And the opportunity to take that break and reconnect not only allows us for that moment to reconnect, but the challenge is also to permanently connect to that. So we then bring back that love and compassion, doesn't make sense, and back into our world, and that naturally extends, I guess, goodness through our own actions, but also it seeps out into those around us. It makes the world a better place. So being good and being happy and peaceful and doing good, it's all the same thing. It's another win-win situation. You can be absolutely happy and content and do all those great things in the world. It's just a wonderful way to spend our lives.
Yeah, and there's no visual, no movie, no whatever technology has created that will give me the same feeling that being eye to eye with a lone elephant, and you are just connected and you're just reading each other and you're feeling what he's. There's nothing like it, and I can't urge people enough. If you feel like your life is like out of control and your priorities are wrong and everything is just out of whack, this is what you need to do. You need to disconnect and you need to unplug and go somewhere. And then when you sense how beautiful and how lucky we are to have this planet and these forests and these magnificent species, then everything has value. Everything has meaning instead of this garbage that we're living in and have to watch on TV. I mean, I can't even connect with it anymore. It's like I can't wait. I'm counting the seconds. I was supposed to be in Zambia for the whole summer and I didn't get to go because of COVID. I'm counting the seconds till I get to go back and work with the team. And, that's everything that you've said. Leif, there's a reason why you have won these awards and you've written these amazing books. In fact, the books you have, in 2002, you came out with Orangutans and their Battle for Survival. Then Orangutans, My Cousins, My Friends in 2016. And then you came out with Finding Our Humanity in 2019. And everything you said has resonated so deeply with me. I'm going to think about this interview forever. I mean, I'm so excited that you made time. You're the busiest man on the planet running 82 foundations. But I have to ask you a couple of things before we wrap up here. So there are many times because of the stress of running a foundation that I find myself, I'm on the living room floor crying my eyes out because the stress, you have people you have to employ and things go wrong and What advice would you give, looking back, because you have a very storied career having this foundation and a successful one? What advice would you give to people in a baby foundation or somebody who wants to change the world and needs to make that first step? What advice can you give to somebody?
Yeah, it's back to the old, what I'm saying is reform yourself, because you can go off on hope or some challenge, and then, as you're saying, naturally in this business, you're just going to be hit by brick walls and people, and as you constantly through the door. But if you're having the real reason why we should act is to express a love within ourselves, a joy within ourselves, and therefore it has to come out. If that makes sense, you have to do something. You have to express love. You have to help. And so there's no big imperative, and it just keeps coming out. And when we have, people and organizations we come against, we have to understand that we also have love and compassion for them. You know what I mean? So we don't hate somebody. We understand. Only reason somebody does anything bad is because, one, cognitive distance, and that's related to the second one. At some level, they're in pain. If you're full of joy and love, you have to express it. I can't help making people happy. I just want to make them happy, because that's just. But if I'm unhappy, no matter what I feel or think to myself, I want to create a better world, I'm just going to. That unhappiness will seep out. Doesn't make sense. And so when somebody is being negative to us and our cause, it's from a deep source of unhappiness. And so we have to understand on an intellectual level, but on a personal level, feel love and compassion for them. This idea of us against them, even against our enemies, is not how we're going to solve the problem. And we talked about multinationals and the businessmen and that sort of stuff. But you may have somebody listening may come back with the impression that I hate these people and I don't have compassion. I don't want to create a better world for them. That's far from the truth. some of the people who, I don't know, running big oil companies, you meet them, they're nicer people than people running conservation organizations sometimes. They're not horrible people. They have cognitive dissonance, doesn't make sense, a lack of empathy for others outside of their circle, those sorts of things, which are just human traits, and the only way we're going to change their minds and bring them along, doesn't make sense, if we don't represent the enemy to them, And when we approach them, we approach them with the same love and compassion that we do for all living beings.
Yeah, that's the way you win them, is with love, because hurting people hurt people. And if you treat them with respect and gratitude and, want to bring them into your world and tell them how excited you are and support them, then it makes it really fun. It makes things easier. Then you don't have to feel like you're hitting against a brick wall. Everything kind of falls into place when you approach it that right way. And if you're somebody who's feels, I always say, if I looked at the big picture of conservation and I saw how many animals are being killed a day, I get overwhelmed easily. So I have to keep my focus down on what I can fix, the area I can fix, and where I can create impact. If somebody wanted to make the foray into helping, what would you say to them? Would you say investigate nonprofits, see what they're all about, learn about something that you love, like what? Because a lot of people feel they feel overwhelmed, like, I don't even know who to support or what to do. Do you need money? Do you need time? Like, what do you do?
It's the hardest thing in the world, and people often will end up first giving and supporting organizations which have no meaningful outcome. And we all do that in the beginning, and I talk about this in my book, Finding High Humanity, my journey through that process. And, but after a while you learn, if that makes sense. So the acid test is, I don't care what your administration cost is. I don't care how efficient you are. I don't care about your marketing. I care about measure how many trees are you saving, how many animals you're protecting. Ask the organization that you want to support the meaningful outcomes, not the process in between. It's just say, no, are you demonstrating, if you're saying rainforest, that this forest is saved, and how you're monitoring it? Are you stopping poaching, or what's the evidence? Have you surveyed the number of tigers this year, and what's the number of tigers 5 years later? Are you measuring? You are what you measure, if that makes sense. If they're not measuring those basic outcomes, then they're probably not doing it, and probably a good reason they're not measuring it, because they're failing. And there's nothing wrong with failing, doesn't make sense, but you got to be honest and say, okay, we're making progress, but we're still slipping behind. With your support, we know we can move this from.
So work with a foundation that is getting it done and not spending money on 82,000 calendars a year. If I get the same calendar from the same company, I'm like, really? If I had your marketing budget for calendars, I would have Africa dialed in. I'm like, how do you spend all this money? So make sure it's going to a worthy organization. And now let's talk about how people can help you and the foundation. So the website is the Orangutan Project .org. You can adopt an orangutan. There are lots of ways for you to help. What area would you like people to learn the most about? Where do you need the most help?
Well, the strategic outcome of saving these ecosystems. So there's adopt an orangutan, a donation, tax-deductible donation in most countries. And then there's Save Forest, where you could sponsor a bit of rainforest that our guys on the field are protecting. So those are the three main ways of connecting people: through the individual orangutans that were being rescued, through saving the forest, and making it a donation that we can strategically use to piece together the whole project. So those are the three ways. And then obviously post-COVID, you come on EcoTour and go to the project and see really what's happening on the ground and see the real outcome of donations and how that's affecting the orangutans and the local communities. That would be the other way of helping.
And when somebody wants to learn about the EcoTour, they just go to the website, and that's how they can get signed up, and the information how to participate?
Yeah, how to help eco tours. It's our partner Orangutan Odysseys. They run the tours, and I come along as the expert guide and take them to places, the non-tourist places, where they see the real people and see real orangutans in the rainforest, not the tourist traps where most people innocently end up. And I do when we're in the jungle, I do talks every night, about the subjects and take people on not only a conservation journey, but a personal journey for a deep, meaningful experience.
If I knew that you were going to be my tour guide and speaking on my eco tour, I would have felt like I hit the lotto. Like, the foremost authority on this species is going to be our tour guide. That's amazing. And I hope one day I get to join you on one of those. And hey, when you're in Zambia, come visit us. We'll save a space for you. I'll take you on a tour there and have a great time.
I'd love to. It's always, obviously, as a biologist, conservationist, I've always been on my bucket list, but it's always been out of my financial reach.
I know. I get
from Australia. So it's going to be one of those, I keep buying a lottery ticket, and if I do win, I'll see you in Zambia.
Well, we'll hook you up when you get there. We'd love to have you. And this has been, I could talk to you forever. You're inspirational. You're compassionate. You have so much to share, not only about the species you're protecting and the other species, but about being a better human being and being a better steward of the planet. And I always say the victory of this show is if one person says, I get it. I'm changing my ways. I get it. I'm going to do something about this. Then it was worth it all. And again, Leif Cocks, my special guest, founder and president of the Orangutan Project, started back in 1998. He's a true veteran of this and many other things. And please make sure you buy his books, learn more about this amazing foundation doing stunning work, saving these magnificent animals. And I really appreciate you taking an hour of your day and spending time with our listeners on IQ Podcast. I want to thank Attorney King for being a great sponsor, Saquon Casino, Indian Motorcycles of San Diego, Serrano's, the gym, and IB Fitness. Can't do it without these guys and IQ Podcast. So I hope you stay in touch. Please let me know, Leif, if there's any way I can help you and assist you in anything and getting the word out. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you guys, and such a joy. So best of luck in Australia. Happy 2021, my friend.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you.